They say time heals all wounds. But I think time just waits until we're ready to listen. This is the story of a letter. A daughter's silence, a mother's love, and the words that finally found their way home. They say that memories don't fade, they just hide, waiting for the right drawer to open. That morning, I was packing the last of my things. The movers were coming next week, and I had promised Lily, my young neighbor, that I would finally downsize. Her words, not mine. The sea breeze came through the half-open window, carrying the smell of salt and jasmine. The kind of scent that makes you remember things you thought you'd forgotten. I opened the old mahogany dresser, the one Harold gave me on our 5th anniversary. The drawers slid easily, except for the bottom one. It stuck halfway, stubborn as a memory that refused to be forgotten. When I finally pulled it open, a small envelope slipped out and landed on the floor. Yellowed edges. Folded twice. My handwriting. I knew it before I even touched it. The tilt of the letters. The impatience in the ink. It was mine, the version of me who still burned with anger, not age. I unfolded it carefully, and the first words hit me like a wave. Dear Mother, I'm writing this because I can't speak to you anymore. Every word I try to say gets turned into silence. I stopped reading. My heart did that thing it still does, a soft tremor, like grief remembering its shape. I had written that letter when I was 25. The year I chose to marry Harold instead of taking the teaching job in Boston. The year Mother said, "You're throwing your life away for a man." And I said things I can never take back. For a long time, I told myself I didn't care. But holding that letter, decades later, I realized you never really stop caring about the people who hurt you. Especially when you loved them first. I kept reading. You were never kind to me. You never said you were proud. You never said you loved me, not once. Maybe that's why I'm leaving to find someone who will. The words were sharp, young, full of the kind of certainty only the wounded can carry. I remembered writing it at the small kitchen table, tears staining the ink. I remembered folding it carefully, walking to the mailbox, and stopping. I couldn't send it. Something in me already knew some words don't fix anything. They just echo. I thought I had thrown it away. But apparently, my younger self had other plans. I sat on the edge of the bed, the letter trembling in my hand. 81 years old, and still that same daughter inside. I thought of Mother's house, the ticking clock, the smell of starch and lavender, her back always straight, her voice always measured. She wasn't cruel. She was careful. And carefulness, I've learned, can sometimes look like distance. She used to say, "Love isn't something you shout, Eleanor. It's something you show." But she never showed it the way I needed. And I never said thank you for the ways she did. We hadn't spoken for 2 years before she died. 2 years of stubborn silence, the kind that turns time into regret. And now here I was, decades later, holding proof of a conversation that never happened. I placed the letter on the table beside me. Outside, the sea murmured like it was remembering, too. I whispered, "Why now?" No answer. Just the gentle rhythm of waves, the sound of old wood breathing. I poured myself tea and sat by the window. For a long time, I stared at the sea, that endless horizon like a page waiting to be written on. Maybe this wasn't an accident. Maybe the drawer refused to close because something in me wasn't finished. That night, I couldn't sleep. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw her mother standing by the sink, washing dishes in silence, her hands pale under the water. And I heard myself shouting again, words I wish I could pull back. I don't need you anymore. Funny, how echoes don't age. I turned on the lamp and reached for my notebook. The pages were blank. I took a breath, picked up the pen, and began to write slowly, carefully, like stitching torn fabric. Dear Mother. This time, I'm not writing to be heard. I'm writing to listen. And just like that, the room felt lighter. The sea outside hummed softly, almost approving. The drawer that wouldn't close stood open now, and for the first time, I didn't mind. Maybe some drawers aren't meant to be shut. Maybe some stories need to be opened again and again until you can finally close them with peace. They say the past is another country. But I think it's just the same town seen through different light. Morning softens everything. So does age. I began the new letter the way you sit down with an old friend you disappointed. Carefully. Honest, but gentle. Dear Mother. I used to believe you didn't love me because you didn't say it. Now I wonder if I simply didn't know your language. I set the pen down and let memory do its slow work. The kitchen first. It always begins there. You, standing at the sink, sleeves rolled, the smell of starch and lemon. You rarely looked at me when you spoke to the plate, the steam, the day. Be careful, you said whenever I left the house. Not I love you. Not come back soon. Just be careful. I was 16 when I decided those 2 words were not enough. 16-year-olds are very certain about what love should sound like. They think it should sound like music. Yours sounded like a weather report. I thought of the first time I left for college. You packed my suitcase as if you were leaving too, folding each shirt, pinning small notes to pockets, buttons, stamps, money for bus. You tucked a spool of thread into the side and said, in case anything tears. I wanted a speech. You gave me thread. At the station, you stood with your hands in your coat, chin lifted against the wind. I waited for the words. You gave me a thermos. Tea, you said. For the long part of the ride. When the train pulled away, I watched you grow smaller, and I told myself I would not be like you. I would be a woman who said everything. When the homesickness came, and it came like weather too, I brewed your tea. It tasted like boiled leaves and stubborn love. I didn't write to say thank you. I wish I had. I put that in the letter. Thank you for the thermos. I understand now, kindness was your grammar. I turned the page. The summer I fell in love with Harold, I expected you to be delighted for me. Movies had taught me that mothers cry and laugh and clasp hands when their daughters fall in love. You did none of those things. You asked, does he treat you with steadiness? I said, he brings me flowers. You said, flowers are easy. Steadiness is not. I called you unromantic. You shrugged and set an extra plate for dinner. When Harold lost his father and stopped sleeping, you sent over soup and said nothing. You never touched his shoulder. You never told him I'm sorry for your loss. You left a note under the bowl, warm carefully. He told me later that your quiet was the kindest room he'd found all winter. I add that to the letter too. You knew how to make space for other people's grief without making it about you. I mistook that for coldness. There were harsher memories waiting, like corners you forget until you walk into them. My Boston letter. The offer on crisp stationery, a literature post, a small apartment, a city with museums and noise. I brought it home as if it were a bouquet that would never wilt. You read it silently and said, it's a good job. It will ask a lot of you. I wanted you to say, go. I wanted you to say, I'll visit. You said, will you be steady? I said, I want to be happy. You replied, steady first. Happy comes and goes. I thought you were jealous. I told you so. You flinched, a small flinch you tried to hide by reaching for the dish towel. We both pretended not to see it. When I chose Harold, when I chose this small town and a smaller life, you didn't come to the wedding. You sent a box with linen napkins and a note, for the table you'll build. I told everyone you were ill. I told myself you were cruel. Years later, I found your ticket stub, tucked between recipes, dated our wedding day. You went to the station. You stood on a platform with a ticket you didn't use. I don't know why you turned back. Fear. Pride. Perhaps you didn't know how to cross the distance your silence had built. Perhaps I should have laid a bridge of words. In the letter, I write, I set a place for you in every room I ever lived in. I wish I'd told you that. I keep going. There were tender things you did without ceremony. When I had the fever, you stayed by the bed all night counting my breaths, whispering numbers to keep yourself awake. When my dress ripped before the school play, your hands moved like little birds, mending what I had torn without saying I told you to be careful. When I cried for reasons I didn't understand, You turned on the radio and left the room so I could be loud without an audience. You loved me by leaving the door ajar. I write that too. You practiced a kind of mercy I didn't recognize. But then the pages turn, and other scenes arrive, uninvited but honest. The day I said, you never said you were proud of me. You were wiping a plate. You didn't look up. You said, it's not about pride. I thought you were dodging me. Now I think you were telling the truth. For you, pride was a dangerous excess, a thing that tipped women off balance. For me, pride was breath. I write, we shared a house. We did not share a dictionary. Another small memory, my 21st birthday. You wrapped a box in newspaper, tied it with baker's twine. Inside, your sewing scissors, sharpened, and the good thimble. I said, I don't sew. You said, you will have to fix things anyway. I wanted pearls. You gave me repair. The older I get, the more I use those scissors. I underline a sentence in the letter. You didn't raise a princess. You raised a caretaker. I resented that until I needed it. I set the pen down, flex my hand, and let the small anger drain. Old anger is like silt, it settles if you stop stirring it. The phone rings. It's Lily. Are you packing, or are you staring at the sea again? Both, I say. She laughs. Then her voice lowers. I fought with Mom. What about? She said I'm wasting my degree taking a job here instead of the city. She called me safe. I wanted her to say she was proud. She might be, I say. She might not know how to say it in your language. Lily sighs. What do I do? Make tea, I tell her. And write to her as if you were writing to yourself. She's quiet. That sounds like something you're doing. It is, I admit. Does it help? It doesn't change the past, I say. It changes where I stand when I look at it. After we hang up, I turn back to the page. Faces soften when you talk to someone else's child. I write to you about the day I left home for good. How I carried 2 suitcases and a heart like a drum. How you stood in the doorway and said, lock the windows. Eat warm food. Don't make a habit of sorrow. I rolled my eyes. I wanted I'll miss you. You gave me a blessing disguised as instruction. Years later, when Harold died, I heard your voice again, don't make a habit of sorrow. It didn't erase grief. It gave me a lever to lift it. I include this. You prepared me for storms without ever mentioning rain. There is one memory I have avoided, which means I owe it my attention. The last time we spoke, 2 years before you died, we were standing in that kitchen, our battlefield, our sanctuary. I said, you made me small. You said, I made you strong. I said, by starving me. You said nothing. I left. The chair scraped the floor. The door was louder than I intended. I want to apologize for the door. For the scrape. For the words that were more about my wanting than your doing. But I also want to forgive the girl who said them, because she was hungry. Hunger speaks in sharp tones. I write. I forgive you for your silence. Please forgive me for the noise I made breaking it. I turn the letter over and begin a list. Not grievances, gratitudes, shy ones that never learned how to stand upright. Thank you for teaching me to keep spare buttons. Thank you for the habit of carrying a handkerchief. Thank you for walking me to the dentist even when I said I could go alone. Thank you for not rescuing me when I burned the pie. Thank you for letting me fail the small things so I could stand the big ones. Thank you for the thermos. Thank you for the scissors. I add one more. Thank you for loving me more than you trusted your tongue. I picture you reading this, which is a mercy because it allows me to imagine the reply I never got. I think it would be short. You were not a woman to waste paper. Eleanor. I did the best I knew. I hope you do better. Love. Mother. It would be enough. I keep writing until the light changes. Until the room tilts from afternoon into something softer. Until the young woman inside me stops demanding and starts listening. There is a story I have never told anyone. It arrives now because stories are obedient to timing, not permission. When Harold and I lost the baby, I didn't call you. I assumed you would say something practical, and I wanted poetry. You arrived anyway, uninvited, holding groceries. You cooked quietly. You changed the sheets. At night you sat in the chair by the bed and knit with the slow patience of winter. On the third day, you placed a small sweater on my lap and said, "We will keep it for the next one, or we will give it away. Either way, love will wear it." I pressed my face into the yarn and cried the kind of crying that has no shape. You did not touch me. You stayed. That is the bravest touch of all. This goes in the letter with careful ink. You were at your best when words would have made everything worse. I close the notebook and try the old letter again, the one from the drawer, the one full of heat. I read it to the end. It is a young woman's righteous music, and I honor her for playing it. Then I fold it back along its cracked seams and slide it under the new letter like a foundation. Anger can be a floor if you build on it. Before I sleep, I speak aloud to the empty room because empty rooms carry messages well. You loved me in ways I didn't recognize. I loved you in ways you couldn't hear. I pause. I will try, now, to learn your language. The sea answers in its old grammar repetition, patience, return. I think of the thermos again, of warm tea on a cold platform. I think of steady hands stitching an invisible hem to keep a life from fraying. In the morning, I date the letter and sign my full name the way you taught me, legible, modest, no flourishes. the way you sign a promise. Then, because the sentence has walked beside me all night, I add one more line at the bottom. You loved me in your silence. I just never learned to listen. I put down the pen and finally, after all these years, hear you say what you were always saying. Be careful. Be steady. Be loved. And somehow, at last, I am. They say forgiveness doesn't change what happened, it just changes the way it looks when you finally turn back to face it. That morning, the sea was quiet. Not silent, never silent, but quieter than I remembered. Like it, too, had run out of things to argue about. I poured tea for one, out of habit. Then, without thinking, I set down another cup. Old habits, I suppose, are just conversations the heart refuses to stop having. The table was scattered with papers, letters I had written and never sent, notes I had started and abandoned, the ghosts of words that had tried to make peace before I was ready. The oldest one, the angry one, still smelled faintly of ink and rain. The newest one, soft and clean, waited like a new morning. Between them sat my pen, the same fountain pen my mother once gave me when I was a girl. She'd said, a woman's handwriting should be honest, not pretty. I didn't understand that then. I do now. Later that day, Lily stopped by. She had that brightness about her youth, hope, the quiet storm of someone trying to grow into their own life. Morning, Eleanor, she said, carrying a paper bag of croissants. Peace offerings, she added, for all the unsolicited advice I gave you last week. I laughed. Then I forgive you. Provided they're the buttery kind. They are, she smiled. She sat down, looked at the scattered letters, and said, you've been busy. I've been, remembering, I said. Are those all to the same person? Yes. Your husband? No, I said softly. My mother. Her face changed, not pity, not curiosity, something gentler. The kind of look you give when you recognize a familiar wound. I wrote to my mom once, she said. When I was 16. I was furious. I told her she didn't understand me, that she never listened. I never gave it to her. What did you do with it? I kept it in a shoebox, she said. Every time I opened it, the anger felt smaller. I smiled. Then you learned young what took me a lifetime, words shrink when you write them down. She tilted her head. Do you think that's why you wrote to your mom? I think, I said, I wrote because silence was heavier. That afternoon, I walked down to the shore. The path was the same one Harold and I used to take, though the wildflowers were gone now, replaced by weeds and wind. Still, the sea was waiting, as it always had, patient and endless. I brought the two letters, the old and the new. In my hands, they felt like two versions of my heart, one clenched, one open. The tide was low. The sand cool beneath my feet. I sat on the same weathered bench where I had once waited for Harold to return from his fishing trips, back when waiting felt like love's truest form. The air tasted of salt and memory. I unfolded the old letter, the one written by my 25-year-old self, sharp and certain, the one that accused, blamed, demanded. I began to read aloud. The words cracked in my throat at first, but I kept going. You were never proud of me. You never said I love you. You never even tried to understand. The wind tugged at the paper, impatient, as if it had heard these complaints before. Perhaps it had from every daughter who ever mistook silence for indifference. By the time I reached the end, my voice was steady. Not because the pain was gone, but because I could finally hold it without breaking. I folded the letter once more. And then, with hands that no longer trembled, I lit a match. The flame caught quickly, curling the edges, turning black to gold, gold to ash. When it was gone, I whispered into the smoke. We were both doing our best, weren't we, Mom? The sea didn't answer. It didn't need to. The water lapped gently against the shore, like a nod. I walked home slowly. Forgiveness makes you walk slower, not because it weakens you, but because you start noticing the world again. The sound of the wind through the grass. The creak of your own heartbeat. The sky, enormous and patient. When I reached the porch, Lily was sitting on the steps, hugging her knees. You were gone a while, she said. I was saying goodbye, I replied. To who? To the version of myself that needed to stay angry. She looked at me for a long time, then nodded. I think I have one of those too. Everyone does, I said. The trick is learning when she's done her job. What job? To keep you from breaking until you're strong enough to forgive. Lily smiled faintly. I think I'm getting there. We went inside. The house felt warm again, not in temperature, but in presence. It's strange how peace has a sound. It's not silence, exactly. It's permission. Lily helped me make tea. She hummed as she worked, the same melody I used to hum when Harold was alive. For a moment, I thought maybe this is what healing looks like. Not grand. Not sudden. Just shared. After tea, Lily said, "Can I read you something?" She pulled out a notebook from her bag, pages crumpled, words crossed out. She read softly. Dear Mom, I used to think you were trying to control me. Now I think you were just afraid to lose me. I used to think you didn't trust me. But maybe, you just wanted to protect me from the things you couldn't protect yourself from. Her voice cracked. She closed the notebook. I'm going to show it to her. Maybe not today, but soon. I nodded. That's brave. She smiled. I learned from you. That night, After she left, I sat by the window and watched the sea again. The horizon was painted in blues and purples, fading into gold. I thought about all the letters written and unread, all the words kept in hearts too afraid to speak. I thought about my mother's voice, the one that used to sound like thunder when I was young, and like music now. And I realized, we spend so much time waiting for the people we love to change, when what we really need is to let our understanding of them change. That's what forgiveness is. Not rewriting the story, just reading it with kinder eyes. I went to the mirror before bed. The lamp's soft light fell across my face. For years, I'd looked into that glass searching for signs of age, the lines, the gray, the soft collapse of youth. Tonight, I saw something else. Her. My mother. In the tilt of my mouth. In the curve of my brow. In the way my eyes softened when I smiled. For a heartbeat, I felt her there, not as memory, not as regret, but as presence. And I said, I see you, Mom. I finally see you. The mirror reflected nothing back but peace. And outside, the sea kept breathing, steady and sure. The same rhythm that once carried her voice, and now carried mine. They say that when the heart is ready, words come easy. That morning, the light looked different, softer somehow, like it had learned forgiveness too. The air smelled of rain and salt, the kind that makes you want to begin again. And so I did. I sat at the kitchen table with a clean sheet of paper, not yellowed like the others, not wrinkled with tears. New. Ready. Unburdened. The pen in my hand felt lighter than it used to. Maybe it wasn't the pen at all. Maybe it was me. I took a breath and began. Dear Mother, I've written to you before in anger, in grief, in longing. But today, I'm writing to you in peace. The first time I ever saw you cry, I was too young to understand it. You were standing by the sink, hands still wet, eyes fixed on something far away. I asked what was wrong. You said, just tired, Eleanor. I thought tired meant weak. Now I know it meant human. I wrote that down. I used to think strength was never bending. But I've learned it's the quiet art of bending without breaking. You taught me that even if you never said it aloud. I paused, listening to the house breathe. Every corner seemed gentler now, every silence softer. Even the clock ticked slower, as if time itself was careful not to disturb this fragile peace. I kept writing. You gave me more than you knew: patience, steadiness, the ability to stand still when the world trembles. I didn't always want those gifts, but now I see they've held me together. The pen glided easily across the paper, almost eager to tell the truth after all these years of keeping quiet. I remembered the day you came to see me after Harold died. You didn't say a word. You just sat beside me, hands folded in your lap. The clock ticked, the tea went cold, and still you said nothing. At the time, I resented it. I wanted noise, sympathy, something. Now I understand. Sometimes silence is love in its most respectful form. Sometimes it says, I'm here. I won't fix you. But I won't leave either. You didn't hold me, Mother. You held space for me. And that was enough. The letter was growing, but it didn't feel heavy. It felt alive. Like it had been waiting all these years to be written in this voice, softer, slower, forgiving. I added, you were not an easy woman to love, but you were an honest one. And maybe that's rarer, and worth more, than easy love. Around noon, Lily came by with groceries. She noticed the paper spread across the table. Writing again, she asked. Yes, I said. The last one. She smiled. Is it for her? It's always been for her, I said. Even the ones that weren't. Lily poured herself a cup of tea and sat opposite me. You seem lighter, she said. I am, I said. It took me a lifetime to realize forgiveness isn't about letting someone off the hook. It's about letting yourself walk free. She nodded slowly. That's beautiful. Truth usually is, I said. We just take a long time to believe it. After she left, I took a break from writing and went out to the garden. The hydrangeas were blooming again, blue, the same shade as the dress my mother once made for me when I was little. The seams had been uneven, one sleeve longer than the other. But she'd stayed up all night sewing it, just so I'd have something new for church. At 7, I thought it was ugly. At 81, I thought it was love. I went back inside and continued writing. You didn't have much to give, but you gave what you had: time, hands, effort. You never said I'm proud, but I see it now in every sacrifice, in every lesson disguised as a warning. You were doing your best with the tools you were given. I'm sorry it took me so long to see that. I stared at the words a while before adding, I forgive you. And I forgive myself for not understanding sooner. The house grew quiet again, but this time it didn't feel empty. It felt full of echoes that finally sounded like music instead of ghosts. I looked around at the life I had built, the framed photos, the books, the half-finished knitting, the sea outside my window. Everything I loved, everything that had loved me, was still here. And somewhere in all of it, she was too. Later that evening, I lit a candle and placed it beside her photograph. In the picture, she's in the garden, head slightly tilted, eyes steady and calm. I used to think that photo made her look distant. Now, I see strength. And something else, tenderness, hiding behind restraint. I picked up the pen again and wrote, if I could see you one more time, I wouldn't ask why you were so strict, or why you didn't say the words I needed. I'd simply say, thank you, for staying, for trying, for being mine. As the candle flickered, the room filled with a golden kind of stillness. It wasn't joy exactly, but it was its cousin peace. I signed my name the way she taught me, neat, legible, without flourish. She used to say, "Clarity is respect." I tied the letter with a blue ribbon, the same one I'd found years ago in her sewing box. I placed it beside her photograph and whispered, "This one's not to be sent. It's already been delivered." That night, I dreamed of her again. Not young, not old, just as I remembered her best. We were in the kitchen, sunlight streaming through the window, dust dancing in the air. She was washing dishes, humming an old hymn. I sat at the table, watching her hands move, steady, graceful, unhurried. She looked over her shoulder and smiled. Not a big smile, just enough to let me know she saw me. I said, "You did love me, didn't you?" She nodded once, as if to say, "Always." When I woke, I was crying. But the tears weren't heavy. They were clean. Morning came quietly. I made tea, 2 cups as always, one for me, one for her. The steam rose like prayer. I whispered, "Good morning, Mom." And somewhere between the clink of the cup and the sigh of the sea, I swear I heard her voice, soft, almost playful. "Good morning, darling." I sat there for a long time, holding that moment like a fragile glass. Maybe it was imagination. Or maybe forgiveness has its own kind of echo, one that sounds like love finding its way back home. Before I closed the notebook for the last time, I wrote one more line. We spend our lives waiting for others to say the right words. But maybe the right time to love has always been now. I placed the pen down. The drawer that once refused to close slid shut easily this time. No struggle. No resistance. And I smiled. Because sometimes peace isn't something you search for. It's something you stop running from. They say peace arrives quietly. It doesn't ring the bell or clear its throat. It just steps over the threshold one morning and sits down beside your cup of tea like it has always belonged there. After the new letter, the house changed its sound. The rooms were no longer hollow, the floorboards no longer mourned. Even the clock seemed to tick as if it had learned to breathe with me, not against me. I kept the small rituals. 2 cups. 2 saucers. One spoken "Good morning, Mom," and one I carried in my chest like a light I would not set down. That's the thing about rituals, they are the bridges we build from absence to presence. Lily came often. Sometimes with her mother. Sometimes with flowers or bread, or simply the kind of smile that asks for nothing. We sat in the kitchen, hands curled around warm cups, speaking of small things, the weather, the price of peaches, an old song that had found its way back to the radio. Underneath, there was always something gentler, a steady current of understanding that did not need naming. One afternoon, Lily's mother said, "Eleanor, my daughter tells me your letters changed her." I smiled. "Mine too. She and we don't always speak the same language." "You do," I said. "You just learned it in different houses." She laughed softly. "Then we'll translate." Translate. What a mercy of a word. The sea kept steady time for us all. Waves counting, gulls marking margins in the sky, the horizon unrolling itself like a ribbon I had finally stopped trying to tie. I began putting things in order not from fear, but from tenderness. In a shoebox I placed the fountain pen, the thimble, the little silver scissors, the blue ribbon that had bound so many pages of my life together. I labeled the lid with my neatest hand, for whoever needs it next. Clarity is respect. Mother taught me that. On my dresser, beside her photograph, the new letter rested folded once, tied with blue. Not addressed. Not stamped. Already delivered. I slept well those nights. Sleep without argument, the kind that has no corners. When dreams came, they came like visiting birds, light-footed, bright-eyed, curious but not insistent. Sometimes I saw my mother, sleeves rolled, turning to me with that almost smile. Sometimes I saw myself as a girl again, knees grass-stained, laughing because the future had not yet learned how to be heavy. I woke grateful. Gratefulness is a soft blanket, it makes even old bones warm. Lily started leaving earlier in the evenings. I teased her, "Go, before the light scolds you." She would kiss my forehead and answer, "I'll be back tomorrow." She always was. On the last day, the air smelled of lilacs and salt. A breeze carried the kitchen curtain a few inches out, then let it fall back as if the house were practicing its own slow breathing. I brewed the tea, set the second cup, and opened the window to the sea. The surface lay smooth as a kept promise. I sat down and said, "Good morning, Mom." And though no voice answered, the room brightened as if someone had set another lamp in the corner. I thought of all the letters written and the one I never sent. I thought of my mother's hands, steady as they folded laundry, steady as they mended seams, steady as they held back the flood of words that would have drowned her if she'd ever let them through. I thought of Lily and her mother and the shoebox of translations we had been quietly making together. I closed my eyes. Not to leave but to arrive. Sometimes the way home is inward. If there was a last thought, it was this. We spend our lives searching for the perfect sentence to unlock another person's heart, and then, on some ordinary morning, we discover that the key was never a sentence. It was attention. It was listening. It was staying. The tea cooled. The sea went on. Peace sat with me and did not move. They found me by the window, the sunlight settled across my lap, a small smile lingering like a signature. Lily knocked, waited, then entered with a soft "It's me." She stopped at the threshold, then came closer, her hands trembling just enough to tell the truth. She did not cry right away. First, she noticed the room, 2 cups, 1 folded letter, 1 photograph, 1 open window. Then the shoebox on the table for whoever needs it, next a blue ribbon looped across the lid like a road. "Eleanor," she whispered, and stroked my hand with both of hers, the way daughters do when they have learned tenderness the long way round. Her mother arrived moments later. There is a silence particular to women who understand what has just happened. They held it, not like a weight but like a shared candle. On the table lay the letter tied with blue. No address. No name. Lily opened it with the care you give to something that might still be breathing. To whoever finds this. If you are reading, you are already brave. Brave enough to hold a paper full of things someone loved and feared to say out loud. Perhaps you too have a letter that is burning a hole in your chest. Write it. You do not have to send it. The heart is a good postman. It knows where to deliver what the hands cannot. Say the apology that won't stop whispering. Say the thank you that stuck to your ribs all these years. Say I love you to the mirror. Say I forgive you to the door you slammed long ago. You are not late. Love doesn't keep time the way clocks do. If this letter reaches you, then it has reached exactly where it was meant to go. With tender steadiness. Eleanor. Lily folded the page against her chest. Her mother touched her shoulder. Grief and gratitude do an old, familiar dance, the steps returned to them easily. The funeral was small. People came with casseroles and soft hands and the fragrance of stories they needed to tell. Each story, a patch in a quilt we hadn't known we were sewing. Lily asked if she could read the letter. Her voice trembled at the edges but steadied in the middle, the way truth does when it finally finds the air meant for it. After the last hymn, Lily's mother pressed her forehead to her daughter's and whispered, "I'm proud of you." "I know," Lily said, smiling through her tears. "I finally heard it." Days passed not away, but into. The house waited, not hungrily but kindly. Lily returned with a small box of blank stationery and a new blue ribbon. She placed them where my pen once rested, beside the photograph and the letter that had already found its home. "Mom," she said to her mother at the table, "I want to try something." She opened her notebook. "Dear Mom, thank you for the ways I didn't see soon enough. For the soup on the step when I wouldn't open the door. For the questions that sounded like criticism but were just fear in disguise. For staying. I forgive who we were when we didn't know better. I love who we can be now." Her mother nodded, shoulders loosening as if the word now had quietly unlocked a bolt. They brewed tea, the second cup out of habit neither of them wished to break. They turned toward the window and let the sea teach them its grammar: repetition, patience, return. Soon, other letters found their way to the table. A neighbor wrote to a brother he hadn't spoken to in years. A widower wrote to his wife, and then, astonished by his own courage, to the son he wasn't sure how to love out loud. A girl of 12 wrote to the future, promising not to be cruel to herself when she forgot something important. The shoebox filled folded pages, forgiven hours, names learned again in softer voices. On the lid, someone added a second line beneath for whoever needs it next. Take what you need. Leave what you can. On a fog-soft morning, Lily brought the box to the community center, the old hall that remembered the sound of quilts and laughter. She placed it on a table by the door with a small sign, unsent letters. Welcome. People approached the way you approach water you intend to bless yourself with. Some sat. Some stood. Some simply laid a palm on the lid and closed their eyes like a prayer had found them before they found the words for it. Lily kept one thing back, the fountain pen. She carried it in her bag, the way you carry a compass. Not because you're lost, because you are willing to be guided. On the anniversary of my passing, she returned to the house with her mother. They opened the windows, aired the curtains, polished the clock's glass until the face shone like a small, patient moon. On the table, 2 cups, 2 saucers, a folded blank page. Start, her mother asked. You first, Lily said. Her mother laughed nervously, then began slowly at first, then with the growing certainty of someone discovering she knows the way home. Dear Lily, I loved you loudly when I should have listened. I loved you quietly when you needed words. I am learning the language of your heart. Will you teach me? Lily nodded, tears bright and easy. Always. She turned the page and wrote one of her own, this one addressed to no person and yet to everyone. Dear whoever needs this. Love may not arrive in the costume you requested. Accept it anyway. Dress it kindly. Teach it your name. They tied both with a blue ribbon and placed them in the shoebox that was no longer a shoebox but a small, generous harbor. If the sea had advice, it was simple. Keep coming back. Let the tides do their work. Seasons changed their shawls, lilacs to apples, leaves to frost. In winter, Lily brought a thermos to the bench by the shore and poured 2 cups into the cold air. Good morning, Eleanor, she'd say. Then softer, good morning, Mom. The steam rose like a blessing that had no interest in being reasonable. One evening, a stranger paused at the box in the community hall. He read the sign, opened the lid, and stood very still, as if the letters inside had exhaled. He wrote one clumsy page, folded it too many times, then placed it atop the others, his hand lingering an extra second, as if to say be found. No one asked his name. The hall knew it already, whoever needs this. And so the letters went on. Unsent and somehow perfectly delivered. Quiet and somehow entirely heard. If I could have added a postscript, I would have written. A letter is a doorway. You do not always walk through it together. But you can leave the light on. Lily learned to do that. So did her mother. So did the town, in its small, faithful ways. The house by the sea kept its shape. The window that faced morning. The table with the 2 cups. The photograph with an almost smile. When new hands dusted the frame, the smile looked less almost than before. Sometimes, at dusk, when the light was a tender gold, neighbors swore they saw an older woman sitting by the window, her face turned toward the shore, her mouth soft as if preparing to speak and deciding, at the last moment, that listening was better. Maybe they did. Or maybe forgiveness leaves aglow the eyes invent in order to say thank you. Either way, the sea understood. It kept up its patient grammar. Repetition, patience, return. And translated for anyone who needed to hear. Before the box grew heavy with pages, Lily tied the first bundle my letter on top with the old blue ribbon and wrote on a card. The letter she never sent. A story of how words, once written, find their way. She placed the bundle beside the sign and smiled through the kind of tears that don't sting. Her mother took her hand. They stood a moment longer than necessary, in the doorway of a room that sounded like a heart remembering its rhythm. If there is a last line to this story, let it be simple. Write it. Even if you never send it. Even if no one reads it but the sea. Write it. So the part of you that has been waiting at the window can finally turn toward the door and go on. She never sent the letter, but somehow it was received. Because love, real love, doesn't always need to be delivered to be understood. It just needs to be written and remembered.